Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fielka. Today is May 5, 2024. We want to thank Rob Grant and his amazing podcast. I'm probably wrong about everything. Also, want to thank John Else for introducing me to today's guest, Mark Danner. Where in the heck you calling in from, Mark?
I'm calling in from the Berkeley Hills in Berkeley, California.
Oh, I love that.
Grizzly Peak Boulevard.
Love that. The first question, Mark, is what is the best thing for a human being?
The best thing for a human being is to be productive, to be loved, to be engaged in some project that'll make the world at least look outside of him or herself.
Yeah. It's beautiful. You know, a homeless guy in Venice, California, Eden Abe, wrote a song called Nature Boy with the line, the greatest thing you'll ever learn is to love and be loved in return. So you really summarized it well there. And Mark, what is your favorite form of information, how it comes into you?
Well, I'd have trouble identifying a favorite form. I love film and have been a film buff since I was really a teenager. So I'm a great fan of film. I go to Telluride Film Festival every year. I'm a resident curator there. But I'm also a maniac about reading. You know, I read a book usually every day and just gobble up books. And that's been the case ever since I was a kid. I think I learned that from the storytelling my father used to do when we were driving up into the Adirondacks in northern New York. He had these stories that he would tell. One of them was David and Goliath. Another one was Samson and Delilah, and Achilles and Hector. And he would tell me these stories, and I was fascinated. And I became very excited when I could read these stories on my own myself. And ever since I've been a really avid reader, as he was before me.
Beautiful. Why do you think humans collect and gather information?
Boy, that's a profound question. I guess I would say that it's inherent in what we are as human beings. I think that we were originally out on the savannah somewhat overmatched by other animals who had big teeth, who had great speed, who were larger in weight. And the one thing we had was the ability to communicate among ourselves one way or another. And communicating meant communicating information. And I think gathering information has been a strong point of humans, qua humans, since we began about 1 million years ago, or 300,000 years ago, if you want to say Homo sapiens. So I think it's been something that's been critical to our survival, you know.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that at this point we don't enjoy it in some sort of inherent way. I think we do. I think we are by nature producers of information, traders of information. I mean, look at social media, you know, which exists by the sheer volume of people wanting to trade information about themselves, which is incredible.
It's amazing. Do thoughts create emotions?
They can. They certainly can. You know, the French have a phrase, l'esprit de l'escalier, the spirit of the stairway. And what they mean by that is you'll be in a dinner party and somebody will say something to you and you'll fumble and not really give an answer. And as you're walking down the stairs, you think of the perfect answer. You know, you think of the perfect thing you should have said. So that's l'esprit d'escalier.
I love it. Two things that evoke. My wife says the perfect art form is the 6-person dinner party where everyone's engaged in the same conversation, not, you know, pairing off and talking.
Yeah, I agree with your wife on that.
Yeah.
A successful dinner party can really leave you exhilarated, you know,
Yeah.
because the fact is coming together of six people is so different than someone thinking on their own. I mean, you're synthesizing thoughts, you're uh, turning back witticisms, it's an organic activity that
Yeah.
humans alone, well, I don't know, maybe other animals do it as well. I don't know. But
Yeah.
it seems to me humans have raised it to an art form.
Yeah. At least we invented the word art form at dinner, so we can say we raised
That's
it to.
true. We can claim it at least.
But the other thing you evoked, Mark, was Bob Dylan learned from the Bible. Don't ever tell anyone everything you know. You know,
Mhm.
if I met you at a dinner party at John's house and we started talking, I would be like, Mark, tell me everything you know, because I want to tell you everything I know.
That's very
um,
funny.
Fill in the blank, Mark. I don't know what I think until
I guess until I judge where I am. I don't know what I think until I judge where I am.
No one's ever said that. That is amazing. McLuhan says, I don't know what I think until I say it. Joan Didion says, I don't know what I think until I write it.
Mm-hmm.
And 80% of people now are saying, when I ask that, I don't know what I think until I experience it or do it. But
Mm.
this word judge, where I am, is such an important thing because you're sort of saying, be here now. Where I am, you mean literally and metaphorically?
Yes, literally and metaphorically. I think
Yeah.
you have to have a guiding intelligence in a sense above everything, where you make a judgment about where you are in the world, really.
Yeah. Can humans think without language?
Boy, that's a really profound question. And I think there's a trivial sense in which the answer is, of course,
Yeah.
of course. I mean, it's impossible to say that before humans could communicate by language, they couldn't think. Of course, they could think. But there's a really more profound level of the question in which Cormac McCarthy was very interested in this. He did his one piece of non-fictional prose was about this, about the relationship between language and consciousness. And he really believed that what we could write down, what we could say, was such an impoverished version of what we're thinking
Yeah.
that it's a kind of compromise with space and time that our thoughts do not have to make. Our thoughts are extraordinarily rapid, quicksilver, and there's no way to set them all down. I mean, sit down and try sometime to do a stream of consciousness,
Yeah.
and it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
So I would say that what we can say never quite catches up or goes at the same velocity as our thoughts do.
Yeah.
And that's why a lot of the times, we'll pick up the phone and somebody will be on and we'll say, "Oh my God, I just thought of you yesterday." And of course, what that means is that we think of hundreds of people every day. We think of lots of people. So what happens when you get that call? It picks out of your stream of consciousness one
Yeah.
item that you weren't aware you were really focused on.
Yeah. So many things I could go into there. I mean, I talked to someone down on the Venice boardwalk about a music. I have no cell phone. I come home and it's some rare thing, and my YouTube algorithm shoots that person up. I
Wow,
goes, how could that happen? That's impossible.
that's
But I
incredible.
know it's like, yeah, and it's the same thing with Finnegan's Wake. We read out loud, and James Joyce talk about stream of consciousness. I mean, the word email and GIF and it's endless. But my friend goes,
Right.
well, all writers have ESP, you
Mm,
know. So I like
I think it's all people have ESP.
well, all people have ESP, but I like the
Although
word you
Joyce was something entirely different. You can't put Joyce in any kind of category.
right. But the word you used was impoverished. That's almost making a value, or Cormac was making a value judgment, because maybe that is the point of life, or not the point, but an amazing, like the word you used, profound part of life is that we can't use language to, because if we could, then we'd really be in trouble, because in essence, we think we can with language. But
Yeah,
here's, yeah, go ahead.
no, I agree. We think we can, but in fact, the most valued experiences that we have beggar the power of language to convey them. I mean, that's why we look to poets
Yeah,
to even approximate the kind of awe we feel with a mystical experience, say, because
yeah,
language, almost by definition, is not up to it.
yeah,
And the same thing, all you have to do is take a hallucinatory drug and
yeah,
afterwards have somebody say, well, what was it like? And you feel like an idiot trying to recount it. Do you know what I mean? Because you just can't,
yeah,
there's nothing there to convey it.
yeah. Well, you nailed it. That's what Beckett said the wake was. It's not about something, it is something.
Yes.
So it's not a description, but I love that verb, beggar. You mean beggar is a verb.
Yes, exactly.
That is an amazing verb. But here's Chomsky: a language is not just words, it's a culture, a tradition, a unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is.
Mhm.
What do you do? What do you do, Mark, when language breaks down? When language doesn't work, what do you do?
Well, I think we've seen periods like that in the contemporary world. I think language breaks down when we talk about the nuclear threat, which we've lived with for 70 years now, and which we don't talk about. We
Yeah,
simply don't talk about it. Language breaks down in certain, I mean, the conflicts now in the Middle East. Frankly, we're suffering from a kind of carapace of dead language that's just lying here. The two-state solution, all of these phrases, which used to mean something and now really don't. So I think we see a lot of situations in which language breaks down. I mean, whenever there's a mass shooting, we get the same, again, a kind of carapace of language
yeah,
that there's nothing new to it. It's just dead language. You mentioned Joyce before, and one of the amazing abilities Joyce had was to make language new. He
yeah,
was quite astonishing in that, all the way back to Portrait of an Artist and Stephen Hero before that. He had a way of making language new that I think really stands against the dead language of our time.
yeah. But Mark, the question was, what do you do when
Ah,
language breaks down? I know it does, but what do you do? What's like one thing you do?
I think you have to try to poke through old phrases. I mean, you have to throw out the dead skin of language, which is cliche.
Yeah,
It's repetitive phrasing. It's all the things that combine to coagulate and
yeah,
make language dead. You have to strip that away and try to find a new and fresh language that doesn't
yeah,
have those things in it. I mean, Orwell wrote about this 80 years ago in
yeah,
Politics in the English Language. That was really a treatise on how our current language was dead. It was dead through propaganda. And I would argue we're in a similar position now. Our current language is dead through propaganda and through advertising. It's in perilous shape.
yeah. Your observations of humans in general, are we more thinking beings or more feeling beings?
Boy, that's a very hard question. Um, I guess I would say we're more feeling beings at the end
Yeah.
of the day. If I had to make a choice between the two,
Yeah.
I think certainly we're happiest when our feeling capabilities are fully engaged.
Yeah.
When we have children, we have families. I think that makes for the happiest person. Of course, it's often true that the people who make achievements that we admire as human beings, artists, for example, are necessarily different from that. You know, some of them have happy home lives, some of them are loners and obsessives. So I think it's a very complicated question. I mean, I've had children recently, late in life, and I found my whole life opening up having these two children. You know, my life has been completely revolutionized by that. And
Yeah.
I would say I'm much more, since having these children, I'm much more of a feeling person, you know. Um,
Beautiful. Yeah, because Bridget Bardot says, "When I make love, I don't think," and I'm like, "Good luck. How do you turn your brain off?" You know.
uh-huh.
And then there's a bumper sticker on a car in my street, and it says, "Don't believe everything you think." And I'm like, "Well, don't believe everything you feel." And
Mhm.
really, it's like this. Most people answer that. I think we're more feeling beings, and
Mhm.
literally, the two words are so connected that we think because we invented the word feeling and we invented the word thinking, we can separate them.
Right. You can't really.
You can't.
You
Yeah.
can't. No, I don't think you can. Uh, I think it's an endlessly productive question, though.
Thank you. Because here's a good one. Because my wife says, don't introduce that question like this. Well, here's a stupid question. Are we more feeling or thinking? She goes, don't say that stupid question because now I can say, see, Mark thinks it's a productive question.
Yeah, I think it's an enormously productive
Yeah.
question because it really announces in the clearest way possible the need to make a decision about who we are.
Yeah.
And, you know, whether or not you can eventually make such a decision, it produces all kinds of reflection on the human condition, no question about it.
Yeah. I was at a film festival and I give these salons with questions like this. And I says, is it more this or more that? And this guy goes, well, it's both. And this student goes, that's a cop out.
That's right.
Because most people say it's both. Or a lot of people say we're both. But again, another person said a funny line. She said, the word more doesn't function in your question.
That's an interesting answer.
Isn't that it? Because
That's very
but
interesting.
here's two from Alan Turing in the 50s. One, is thinking a function of the soul?
I'd say yes. Um, I'm not sure function. I'm hung up a little bit on the word function.
Yeah,
Um, I would say uh, there are days when your soul feels good, and you know, thinking and forming complete thoughts, writing a piece, for example, can make your soul feel good because somehow your whole being has come together to produce something, and you get a feeling of fruitfulness, which I think is part of your soul. The idea of uh, producing something, even if it's a new thought, but it's very soul connected, I would say.
yeah,
Um, I mean, the soul, you know, it's interesting. I think it's most connected to our ethical being. Our soul feels good when we call up our 95-year-old mother and say hi and
yes,
talk for 20 minutes. And we get off, and it's not just a question of feeling good. You know, your soul feels good because you're in somehow at one with the universe as a functioning thing. You've done the thing that should be done. It's not entirely ethical, if that makes any sense.
it made us so much sense. It's just
Yeah.
like every Sunday when my mom was alive, it was like, oh yeah, it was just the way you described it felt good. And see, this is the thing, Mark. it's me and you versus the wording on the question. So when you said, well, the word function, that's what I'm after, is that I'm not trying to nail these questions like, here's the way the wording should be. I'm
Right.
like, oh, I want to challenge that word, or I want to switch that word. And that was really important to me because you really get it. The second Turing question is, can machines think?
I'd say the question, I mean, at the present moment, it seems like the answer is no,
Yeah,
because AI is very much about mechanically, even though the mechanics are enormous, storing up things that have been known and simply regurgitating them, even though it's a very complicated process. I mean, probably soon the Turing test will be successfully run. Um, but I think thinking is a lot more complicated than that. It implies creativity to me.
yeah,
And we have not constructed a machine yet that's creative in any kind of interesting way. I mean, the closest we've come is machines that play chess and things like
yeah,
that. But they're not really creative in that way. I mean, we may eventually, and we probably will eventually, construct a machine that, by most definitions, can think. I think that's quite possible that will happen, but it will simply mean that thinking as a subset of human activity is not unique. Um, it, I mean, what's unique is our ratiocinating, in a moral world. That is that we combine our thinking with moral precepts that are human created,
right.
that are not, dogs can be affectionate and they can help save their owner, but they don't have a moral sense in the way humans do.
Yeah,
So I think thinking is very much a subset of, if you want to call it the soul, that's fine.
yeah,
But it's a subset of a larger uh, apparatus that can perceive a sunset, that can see the glory in the world in some way. That doesn't have to be connected to organized religion, but is nonetheless a cause of awe. And I think we will not be able to construct a machine that can feel awe. I think that is that would be the test that I think would be interesting.
yeah.
Whether a machine can be conscious, we don't really know what consciousness is. We're still completely befuddled by what consciousness is. So
You you're anticipating a question about two down the road, but I got to tell you, here's how the two Turing questions. I really appreciate how you operate with your word. You're a wordsmith, but you're a thinker and a feeler. It's really amazing. It feels like I'm talking to Harold Bloom, who's like to me
that's
like a
high
hero.
praise.
Huh?
That's high praise. I
Well,
met
I'm
him.
glad. I'm glad because
He
some
called
people might
everyone
say it's
darling.
this, but he knew how to take aphorisms and not just go, here's an aphorism, blah, blah, blah. And people go, whoa. He knew how to put him into a context where we could take it further. Like Umberto Eco says, you stand on the shoulders of giants and look further. So
Mm-hmm.
so most people, when I say, is thinking a function of the soul, they go, well, it depends on what you mean by the soul. And then I go, well, can machines think? And they go, well, it depends on what you mean by think. And I goes, well, you win because this series is about inventing new questions, but it's all right already. Everybody's asked that question.
Yeah,
We know what a soul means in essence.
I think we do.
Me and you kind of know what a soul is, but they go, well, what is a soul and what is thinking? So you really get it. Now you've anticipated like the next four questions already. Do you more pursue no, wait, I want to do this one first because this is a new Turing one I got.
Okay.
Turing said, what we want is a machine that can learn from experience.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's two parts of that. Is he saying what we, meaning the mathematicians who are doing this, or does he mean what we want as humanity? Your hunch. And then what does this mean to you? What we want is a machine that can learn from experience.
Well, I think, first of all, I think he probably meant larger humanity. I mean, maybe in the context of that
Yeah.
statement, there are clues to what he actually meant, but it seems to me the more interesting uh, way to interpret it is that he's speaking for humanity.
Yeah.
And I think that's one thing that we have done. We
We
have
got
done
that.
that. We have
Yeah.
machines that learn from experience now. There's
Yeah.
no question. And we were close to doing that in his time, back in the 50s.
Yeah.
So we definitely have that.
Yeah.
The question is whether that's the thing that's most desirable about humans, and I think it isn't. I think it
Right.
isn't. I think it has to do more with the work of the soul, and the soul is, morally, in a sense, the moral center of our being. It's
Yeah.
affected by moral action. And that, I think, will never build machines that that's true of.
Yeah.
Although if you look at Blade Runner, for example,
Yeah.
That posits a world in which you have, replicants who do have, for all practical purposes, do have souls, which is one of the reasons why humans want to kill them after a certain amount of time. They're essentially afraid of them.
Yeah, in HAL in 2001. And so here's the McLuhan line that I'm going to tell you what I think it might mean. I could be wrong. And then you tell me what you think. Everybody experiences far more than they understand, yet it is experience rather than understanding that influences behavior. So I stretch it a little. I say what he's kind of saying is if the kid comes in from the cold, the parent can go, don't touch the stove, that will burn your hand. That's experience. Whereas the parent could go, let me teach you the dynamics of heat. You can get really close to the stove, rub your hands together, and get your hands warm. So yeah, I think he's not one to make value judgment. He's kind of saying we should have understanding shaping our behavior, but we rely too much on experience shaping our behavior.
Yeah, I'm not sure what he's saying as a critique necessarily, but I think it's a reality that we experience vast amount of information. I mean, I use information in the broadest possible term, the beautiful view I'm looking at out my window at the moment. And, the things I'm hearing in the background. We tend to commit rational thought. We tend to simplify the world dramatically. So, and that's what I see that with my kids, growing older is learning the ability to filter out all the things in the world so that you can think rationally. And in learning that, we impoverish the world. We don't, I mean, again, not to go back to, I'm already mentioned hallucinogenic drugs, but I think one of the qualities they have is that they take off those filters.
Yeah.
And you experience the world in a kind of naive way that you haven't done since you were an infant, really.
Yeah.
I don't know, the relation between experience and information is an interesting one, because information is more a kind of codified experience, right?
Yeah.
It's what you find in libraries.
Yeah.
That's information. And experience has a kind of richness. And I mean, experience is why we go hiking and stand on the top of mountains.
Yeah.
Right. And that has nothing to do with information. It has nothing to do with that mountain's over there. It's something else. I mean, a dog does not climb a mountain to look off. I think it's a very human centered activity, that kind of activity, to seek aesthetic experience, whether in the landscape or in a museum.
Yeah.
So is that information or is that experience? I'd say that it's experience.
Yeah, it's so beautiful what you said, because I go to the library every day, Marina Del Rey Library. It is so comfortable a setting.
Mm-hmm.
And I like on Saturdays my best, because you get that book section from the Wall Street Urinal, and it's like you read like 4 book reviews and they're so well written, and it's like that experience to me, that is the richness, and the info is almost incidental. So
Yeah.
I think, so it can be a flip, but I love you separating the two, because everybody goes, no, experience is more important than understanding, because that's all we do is, experience things. What are you doing? And you're not going to learn from experience.
The other thing is information. When you're a kid, I remember in college, I had all these books I wanted to read, and there were some I was embarrassed not to have read. Middlemarch was always a book that I was embarrassed not to have read. And I realized quite a bit later that I'd been thinking of the mind as kind of a big barrel that you throw things into. Now I've read Middlemarch. Now I've read War and Peace. And of course, as you get older, you realize that what's valuable about reading War and Peace is not having read War and Peace. It's reading War and Peace. Do you know what I mean? It's the experience itself. I think that's a perception you get as you grow older.
You mean it's not the content; it's just another book.
but the feeling of being immersed in it is the value of it, not having read it.
Right. But we do know, being readers, there's a difference. But I mean, I was raised in front of a TV. I'm a idiot. I can't read. I can read an article about Middlemarch and then act like I read it. And people don't know. They think, wow, you're smart, and I feel, so what? I cheated, and I got away with it. But the big barrel thing, Mark, was amazing, because my friend who's blind since birth, his partner for 50 years, they play music together. He says, well, what does Mott see? Does he see black? And he goes, no, he sees empty. So it's this though that his hand can be put into a barrel. When you said big barrel, it really brought it. His hand can be put in a barrel and it can be filled with water. So he feels the barrel and he feels the water. Then you pour the water out and he feels inside the barrel, and he says that's what he sees.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Is empty. And it was like, wow, because me and you, how could we imagine not knowing what our eyes shut?
Yeah, no, I can't imagine it. And that's a fascinating description to me.
It's amazing. Yeah. And so do you more pursue happiness or more pursue meaning?
Boy, that is a really difficult question. I hate to say both, because it's such a kind of a cop-out answer, but I think I pursue happiness through the pursuit of meaning.
Yeah.
Many of my efforts at writing are to figure out what something means, and only by setting that out in prose can I come to the conclusion that maybe was imminent in some way in my mind, but I couldn't get to it. When I eventually get to it, I find happiness. I find, after writing something that I'm satisfied with, there is a unique kind of happiness. I mean, I always want to clean my office. I have that feeling of being past something and having, almost like climbing a mountain in some way. So meaning to me is really kind of a pathway to happiness, I think.
Yeah. Well, I got it from Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning.
Oh, yeah, that's a great book.
He says happiness doesn't tend to last and meaning does.
That's interesting. I mean, well, he's thinking of happiness as his life, of course, led him to that perception, the life he led. But he's thinking of happiness as kind of an intermittent feeling, whereas I'm thinking of happiness as a lasting feeling. So I guess I'm thinking of happiness more as contentment.
Yeah.
Rather than happiness in an active sense.
Yes, contentment. See, that's the real good listeners to my questions will say, well, I changed that word happiness to that you like contentment. That's really beautiful. Well, Does the brain more detect consciousness or create it? Like, is consciousness there bubbling away and we're more detecting it or more so creating it?
I think we create it.
Yeah.
I think we create it. I think, there's a book that I love called The Sense of Being Stared At. The
Yeah.
Sense of Being Stared At. It's by Rupert Sheldrake, who, by the
Yes.
way, would be a perfect person to have on this program.
Yeah.
He did these experiments. You know how everybody thinks when somebody looks at you, you eventually feel it and look back at them.
Yeah.
That's a very common belief, right? But of course, if you think about it for a minute, well, that's not scientific in any way. How could that be true? And he set out to see if it was actually true, and he actually found out that it is true.
Yeah.
That if he had these fairly rigorous experiments, and he found out that a non-trivial amount of people can detect that they're being looked at. And that suggests to me that mind is a creative, powerful thing that has many, many powers that we don't really know about. We don't really understand. He describes that as he calls them morphic resonances.
Yes, morphic resonance. Yeah.
And I'm not sure about morphic resonances, but I do think that the mind is an active creator of things rather than a somehow passive receptor.
That's two things. That's McLuhan called it the resonant interval, that in betweenness. And
it's a great phrase.
Yeah, and it is morphic resonance is an amazing thing. Yeah. Rupert Sheldrake, beautiful. That was really good. And so what's faster, speed of light or speed of thought?
Speed of thought, without a doubt. I mean, if you answer in a scientific way, you would say that these are electrical impulses and they must be, and they can't be faster than the speed of light. But there's a secret about the speed of light, which is that, here, let me pose a question to you. The universe is 13.8 billion years old, right? That's the Big Bang.
Yeah.
You know how wide the universe is thought to be now? 93 billion years, 93 billion light years.
Yeah.
So how is it that the universe, if it's only existed for 13.8 billion light years, and if you can't travel faster than the speed of light, how is it that the extent of the universe is 93 billion light years? That doesn't add up. And of course, the reason is because though nothing can travel faster than the speed of light, the universe is expanding faster than the speed of light.
Yeah.
Isn't that a weird idea? But it's
that's amazing. And it's also when people say, okay, I say, what's faster, speed of light or speed of thought? They usually go, well, for me, it takes me a while to figure out these questions. It's got to be the speed of light. And they'll go, no, scientifically, the speed of light. And when people say the speed of thought, because I ask these questions, because I want people to say the answer I like, even though I'm not going to tell them that, because I want to figure out like that Bob Dylan thing. I want to hear everything, When people say speed of thought, I go, well, Mark, there's no right or wrong answers to any of these questions, but that one you got right.
I think so.
I do too. I think how speed of thought is way faster than speed of light because we can think it, and you can't. Well, it's also how much, and you already know this, how much you take words literally and how much you take them metaphorically.
Mm-hmm.
And McLuhan said all words are metaphoric. And that's why Etymology Online is my favorite website, because it's not bullshit, but it's like people made this up. Well,
I love it.
This word came from this. It's like, well, how do you know that word came? It's like I asked Charlie Hayden once, the great jazz bass player, I goes, in the middle of a Ornette Coleman song, you play an old Appalachian folk song. And I goes, what's the name of that? And he goes, oh, that's old Joe Clark. I goes, who wrote it? And he goes, Nobody wrote it.
Nobody writes these things.
Nobody. I just said, dude, somebody wrote it, but it's that it's passed down. It's like waters
Yeah.
of water. It's
But
passed.
words are the same thing. I have a 1 word a day calendar,
Oh, nice. Yeah.
So every day I get the history of a given word.
Yeah.
And I find it so interesting because nobody did that. Nobody did it.
Exactly.
It's a process that happens over centuries.
The best etymology entries go of unknown origin.
Right.
I guess
This
every
is true.
word is of
Yeah,
unknown origin.
I love that.
And
Or
then
it appeared in the early 16th century.
Right. And then my other favorite is the coolest words that I find are from the back alleys of London from the hoodlums.
Oh, yeah.
They invented all the cool words.
This is true. This is true. The great slang.
Mark, this is so fun. I really appreciate it. This is Audre Lorde, the poet. You can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. Yvonne Rainer responded, you can if you expose the tools. What new tool do you suggest?
What new tool do you suggest? I guess I'd say the tool of complete openness.
Yeah.
That's such an interior question, the house, the tools. But you have to believe if you're caught in the master's house in some way, that there's something residual in you that will be revealed through a real openness that you have to reach. Do you know what I mean? That's a parable about imprisonment in a way.
Yeah.
And I think by a radical openness, is the way.
That's beautiful. It's an amazing. See it, and people go, well, that's not new. I says, well, that doesn't matter. You don't see the way I word the question. It's really, I'm asking, what tool do you gravitate towards? And they say, well, you mean, what is the master's house? Because, Frank Zappa had that great question. Who are the brain police? Now, did he say, oh, the consumer capitalists are the brain police, or the voice inside your head are the brain police? No, he just said, who are the brain police? Right. So knowing Audre Lorde is probably talking about white supremacy, they might go, well, who's the master's house? So see, you know how to take the question and process it. And I appreciate that. So what new toy do you suggest?
What new toy do I suggest? I've mentioned several times my children.
Yeah.
And the toys I suggest are the ones that get us laughing out in a field.
Yeah.
Or out among the trees. And those toys really have to do with things that I'm taking this literally, this question, but with things that you throw and things that you catch and things that you run after. Those are to me, the new toys that are most important. That like, what are you doing when you're throwing a ball back and forth? Think of what a funny activity that is.
Yeah.
To just throw it back and forth. And yet it's a wonderful activity. You can do it. I used to do it with my father for hours. I remember saying, Dad, no, when he wanted to go into the house. And I like to do that with my kids too, not only to throw things, but miss it, catch it, run after it, try to find it. It goes under a bush, retrieve it, throw it again. You've learned the landscape through your mistakes,
Oh, it's so good. It reminds me when you play ping pong in a basement or just in a room, it's always about finding the ball under the crap that's sitting around the ping pong table. But you really implied one that I love. This really brilliant Notre Dame professor said, well, what new toy I suggest is the one when you were walking down the path and the kid picks up a stick and goes, wow, look at this is a new toy.
Mm-hmm.
Like And then it reminds me of Matt Groening had that comic Blinky, Life in Hell, before he did The Simpsons, and there was one that stuck out to me so huge. The mom comes out and the kid's playing with a plastic gun, and the mom goes, "I don't want you playing with war toys," and she grabs the war toy and throws it out, and then the kid goes out and picks up a stick and starts shooting it like a gun. So it's like, whoa, that's saying something deep, like
Yeah.
it doesn't, which is something we'll get into, but that was really good. Now, what do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
Oh gosh, I worry about very mundane things like, how I'll get the sufficient cash to do X, and
Yeah.
things about the future and planning vacations. And I wish I was worried about profound things because my worries are always very mundane. And sometimes I'll worry, when I've taught a class and I don't think I responded to a student in the right way. I'll not having thought about it all day, I'll lie down to go to bed and I'll start worrying about that and think I didn't tell her the right thing.
Yeah.
I gave her short shrift.
Yeah.
And that makes me worry because I take teaching very seriously. And teaching is one of the great pleasures in life, I think. I didn't used to think that, but I do now, which may essentially be a function of age. Just I intensely enjoy teaching and I feel this great love for my students. So, literally kind of a feeling like I love them. It's hard to describe, but I was talking to somebody about this last night. And sometimes I'll lie down late at night and think, that was a terrible answer to that question. I should have given her more time and I was in a rush and I didn't answer it in the right way. And I shouldn't be in a hurry,
Yeah. No, it's beautiful. Mark, where you went with that from mundane things. People go, what do you worry about when you go to bed at night? Which is the question I got from Rumsfeld's movie by Errol Morris.
Oh yeah, that's right.
I'm using that question, and
that's
people
a great question.
It is a great question, and people go money, and then they think, oh, I'm so material. It's like, no, it doesn't. I'm just after just your hunch, your guess, your feelings, your impulse. But my mom, when she died, I gave a talk at her wake service, and I says, there's a lot of people in this room who worried that Dolores worried too much. Because in essence, my thing is a follow-up question is well, what's the difference between worry and concern? Because isn't worry just the same thing in a way? She was concerned about us.
She was concerned.
And so they go, well, you worry too much. And then people go, well, worry is trivial and concern is big. Like, I mean, what do you think? What's the difference between worry and concern?
I think worry, it's funny. There's a different use of worry in which you worry a wound or you worry a scab. It's this consistent poking at or pulling at. And I think worry, we should start with that when we think about worry and its different qualities from concern.
Yeah.
To be concerned is like a single act of being concerned about someone. And that concern can stay. But worry is like grinding your teeth and using the concern as a motivation to get into a kind of fugue state where you worry and worry and worry and worry. And I often, late at night would be the time I do that too. When you know that you're not using your time well, because it's a kind of indulgence. It gives pleasure, not unlike, picking at a scab. It's not good for you, but it gives a kind of perverse pleasure.
I know my mom's listening right now from
I hope so.
she's like, don't pick at that scab, let me pick at it. I'm a nurse. I can do it better. But Mark, you'll love this. I heard this cliche once, and I've been wanting to say this to you forever. One of McLuhan's best book, or one of his great book titles, and you don't have to read his books, just read the titles. And it's called From Cliche to Archetype.
Oh, I never heard of that.
Yeah, it's an amazing phenomenon because all these cliches turn into archetype, and then they're all that Schopenhauer thing. Now, that's wrong. Oh, I knew it was right all along.
That's great. I never heard of that book.
Oh yeah, it's
From Cliche to Archetype.
Oh yeah. Google Amazon that sucker, or ABE books. But especially for someone who reads a book every day, man, read all 22 Marshall's book titles and then decide whether you want to read them.
I'm writing that down. What was that website you said that you liked?
Etymology Online.
Etymology Online.
Yeah. But here's the cliche I want to throw out, Mark.
Okay.
And if you ever find out who said, I'd love to know, is if you worry and you gossip, you live longer. Oh, no. I said it wrong. If you complain and gossip, you live longer. So, I mean, I'm putting complain in the category of worry. Like we go, don't worry, don't complain. It's like, no, these are the things that engage us and make us live long. Like, the great, amazing interview in New York Times Sunday Magazine last week, I was blown away, is Anne Hathaway. I don't know much about her, but she says, I don't want to die stressed. Mm-hmm. And then Emma Stone, another movie star, said, I use stress and anxiety as a food for my work. Mm-hmm. So it's like, you don't want to feel like, oh my, the word you said was, I'm wasting time worrying about this at night. Mm-hmm. Well, maybe that's not wasting time. That is indeed you engaging in that productively.
Right. So worry in that sense is like the steam that comes out of the top of a kettle.
Yeah,
which I think is probably true. And the sweeter part of it is that gossip is too. That gossip allows you to, in a way, lighten your frustrations. By reflecting on the shortcomings of other people, because that's really what gossip is. Yeah, and it's a kind of leveling of everything around you. Who doesn't like to gossip?
Yeah, no, the leveling word is great. Yeah. Mm. Yeah. And it's amazing. It's just like, well, that's why I think that cliche is true. The two old ladies in the town square would go, oh, they gossip about that, and then they complain. Well, they're showing love and concern for their community.
Yes.
But that's engaging in humanity, and it's leveling. So it's amazing. So McLuhan learned from Ezra Pound that artists are the antenna of the race. They're broadcasting and detecting the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, so we might be able to cope with what we don't like about our inventions. So, Mark, I asked you the question Marshall probed his whole career. Why do we ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though the artists are broadcasting them to us?
I think because we're directed toward, one way or another, the grind of daily life or the quest for achievement.
Yeah.
So we use things pragmatically. Not inquisitively.
Yeah.
Which is a very different way. And I think that changes throughout life. I think later in life, you're not so focused on achievement and pragmatic use.
Yeah.
So you have more time for probing with the antenna in that way. Yeah. I'm sitting here talking to you from this house that belonged to Czeslaw Milosz, the great poet who won the Nobel Prize in 1980. And I used to rent the house from him, and then I finally bought it from him. And he has this great little story, which is that you walk into a museum and it's a huge museum, and you look down one hallway, and at the end of the hallway, 300 feet away is a painting on the wall. So far away, you can't see the subject, you can't see what's in it, you can hardly see the colors. And yet you say to your friend, let's go look at the Veronese down there. You know it's a Veronese. And why are you able to recognize that that's a Veronese so far away, or another artist?
Yeah.
And Milosh says that the answer to that is what you're seeing is the artist's spirit, which is individual. Yeah. And that, when you turn on the radio and you hear Mozart and you immediately know it's Mozart, what you're recognizing is this undeniable, very individual spirit. And he goes on to say that everybody has that. We all have it. What's significant about artists is they have some mechanical means to actually produce it, to reproduce it.
Yeah.
So an artist is able, Tintoretto, in making that painting, is able to reproduce his spirit in a way that will last long after he's dead. And I've always found that very beautiful, because the notion that, it's something we all have. Artists just happen to be able to, through training or whatever else, to imprison it that way, to somehow take it out of the flow of time. I've always loved that little story.
Oh, so well put, Mark. It really evoked two major things. McLuhan's favorite line was, the Balinese have no word for art. They do everything as well as they can.
That's great.
So it's like, everybody's the guy who, everybody's doing art, but we, now the commodification of art, then James Joyce said, love thy label as thyself. It's like, who cares what the person's name is in the long run? If that artist's spirit is touching you, is that what's important? Or is it that, because I'm a funk musician freak, and I said, who are your three favorite funk guitarists? And this guy goes, whoever played on the Joe Tex albums. And he always says, thank God someone didn't say a name, because I'm asking for a name. And he said, no, it's whoever did that. And he was in the background. And it was just like, we don't, do we need names? Well, yeah, I mean, it's important. Like, we think we have to own shit,
But for a while, if you go to Greece, most of the great artwork you'll see there from ancient times has no name attached to it. It's just, there it is. Yeah. And the artist is known as the artist who did the Venus, whatever,
That is beautiful. So do artists have moral obligation?
Only in their personal lives.
Yeah.
Not as artists. They don't.
Yeah.
And I'm much, there's a growing movement on campus that, no, why would we look at Picasso? He was terrible to women. Oh, yeah. I find that kind of reasoning pernicious.
Oh God.
I don't like it at all. I showed in a film class I gave this semester, I showed Chinatown, and somebody pointed out that Polanski, the director, had been arrested for having sexual relations with a teenage girl and so on. And I hate the idea that we wouldn't look at art because of something like that.
Oh God, tell him to watch all the movies too. The mom pushed the girl onto Polanski, but he flubbed. He's a human. He flubbed. And my friend he chooses not to teach Woody Allen because he knows some of the students will get in his case. Yeah. And it's like, you're missing out,
No, it's terrible.
Yeah. And so are you more afraid of new ideas or more afraid of old ideas?
I'm not afraid of ideas at all, I don't think. Yeah. I'm very welcoming of ideas.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, you can certainly conceive of cases where ideas are dangerous, quote unquote, but I give you those air quotes because I think ideas taken as themselves are not moral or immoral. They're a thing to be understood, you know.
Yep. Yeah, that's beautiful. And so, Mark, can you conjure up your earliest memory ever or one of them?
Gosh, my earliest memory is trying to help my little sister walk. I was probably 5 and she was probably 2. And I was holding her up by her waist and trying to walk with her across the living room floor, living room carpet. That's
Yeah.
the earliest memory I have.
Is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
It's a blessing, without a
Yeah.
doubt.
Yeah.
It's, you know, it's amazing to me the way memory works, that, you know, we think of experience as the ocean, you know, 6 miles deep. The oil slick on the top is memory. That's what we remember at every given time of that 6 miles of experience. And yet, at a given moment, if somebody walks into the picture or if someone calls, suddenly you can retrieve all kinds of things from the bottom of the ocean. They're
Yeah.
there. They just weren't immediately available to you. And I find that a kind of miraculous quality of memory.
It's amazing. Tell me someone within your immediate family, then outside your immediate family, just briefly, who had an impact on you, kind of like a role model. And what specifically was that impact?
I think within my immediate family, I'd say my father, who was an avid reader, a thinker, who loved telling stories about how history, mostly how the First World War started, how the Second World War ended, the Battle of Troy, all of these different things, various things from the Bible. He was a great storyteller. And
Yeah.
I think he had a profound effect on the way I think of things in terms of stories.
Yeah.
Outside the immediate family, I'd say Robert Silvers, who was one of the 2 founding editors of the New York Review of Books, and for whom I worked right out of college. And then I continued writing for him for 30 years until he died 6 or 7 years ago. And he really taught me. I would sit late at night as he was working on a piece with a pencil, and he'd be rewriting it, and he'd throw it one page after another into the outbox on his desk. And it was my job to take the page from the outbox, look at it, and retype it. So I'd look at all his editing, all the pencil marks. And he really taught me how to edit and thereby how to write much more clearly.
Wow.
And he was incredibly devoted to his work. You know, he would come in at 9:30 every day and he'd stay till midnight or later. So I really learned about the kind of devotion it takes to do something really well, because he did something really well. You know, he was remarkable, remarkable man. So, and was also extremely important in publishing and being loyal to the work I wrote, you know, and publishing what I wrote and being a loyal supporter, really.
It's beautiful. And I love you use the word devoted because, and I know that we could talk about that for a 8-hour Netflix series because Stanley Cavell. I mean, you
Oh,
work with a
yeah.
lot. You work with a lot of greats, and it shows. But the word
Yeah, I was
devoted,
lucky.
yeah, the word devoted. I ask this question sometimes. Where'd you get your work ethic?
Oh, gosh, that's the hardest question you've asked me, because my work ethic is a disaster. You know,
You're kidding. I don't believe that. What do
I
you
mean,
mean it's a disaster?
well, I work in very sporadically. I tend to finally get onto something and then work very quickly in finishing it. But it'll take me a long time to get started. And I have an inability to do shitty drafts. To be a writer, you have to be able to do shitty drafts.
Do shitty drafts.
It's
Oh,
very
wow.
important. There's a story I love of D.H. Lawrence writing Women in Love, and he's sitting under a tree with a pen, filling up these pads of yellow paper, and he's got a pile of them, and it's the novel. And he, boom, finishes the last word of the novel, period. He takes this pile of pads, puts it down next to him, picks up a new yellow pad, and starts the novel again. He's going to write it again without looking at what he just did. And I've always thought, wow, that's an example of healthy creativity, being able to just realize it's in your head and in your heart. You don't have to look at what you just did. You just keep going.
That's a really good story, because my friend, he says, I have a dread line. I goes, I don't want to hear the word dread line. I want to think of it as positive.
Yeah.
But it is, back to, it's really beautiful. You went into that story because that's what I'm after. But I'll tell you the history of that. Everybody asks, where'd you get their work ethic? They go, my parents, my dad. If you look at work ethic in Wikipedia, about the third paragraph down, it says, this could be a scam from consumer culture.
That's great. I like that.
Because it is like, do it. I like that. When I write, I want to start taking notes just like you, but you want to, you literally have to label that you're making a value judgment. Shitty drafts.
Right.
Well, they're not shitty drafts. They're just drafts. But you're like, wow, this is a little scattershot at this point,
But you have to be willing to go through the whole piece and not make a good piece. And I have a lot of trouble doing that. I'll always want to polish up the beginning, and then it ends up taking you forever.
Well, I'll send you my latest piece because I'm a horrible writer, but it's too long and scattershot, and all it is a bunch of lists of quotes, and it's called "Can Art Stop War?" And I interviewed this woman. She runs, you probably know her. She runs an important press, a publishing company, and I says, oh, well, how much could I pay you to go through my essay? And she goes, no, just send it to me. And she went through it without saying, you got to change your focus here and this. She just picked up 5 little grammatic things, and she added one little thing, and it was amazing. So, anyways, that was good. That was a side question, where you get your work ethic from. Okay. So did your parents raise you a particular religion?
This is Truman.
Hi, Truman.
Code for you.
Say hi to Jerry, Truman.
Hi, Jerry.
Hey, good to see you, buddy.
Thanks, Truman. Go on, let me finish, okay?
Oh.
Okay, see you later.
Okie dokie.
I'm sorry.
Don't be sorry. I'll tell you, this is one of the greatest moments in my since COVID started doing Zooms. It's been amazing because, it'd be, well, when I'm up in the Bay Area, can we get together? Or when you're in LA? And it was ridiculous. Now I do 4 a week, and it's so amazing. And for 25 years, I wanted to interview Wayne Kramer, the guitarist for MC5. Mm-hmm. And finally, I got it. And, he just died a couple months ago, and it was a year or two ago. And in the middle of the podcast interview, asking him all these same questions, his son walks in and he goes, oh, hi. Oh, daddy's working right now. And he said, I just want to give you a hug, Dad. And it was chilling to me. That was beautiful, that you could just welcome him in, and not say, hey, get away from the kid, you bother me.
You gotta welcome Truman in.
Yes. So did your parents raise you a particular religion?
They did. I was raised Jewish. My father, his father was Lutheran, so he had Lutheran pastors in his family. And we were thought of as kind of, in the temple, we were thought of as kind of mutts, mixture.
Yeah.
But I was raised Jewish. I was bar mitzvahed. I, you know, loved learning about the ancient Near East. It's always interested me. That's one of the things I was a benefit of having that kind of education, learning about the Edomites and the Moabites, and really reading the Old Testament. I think, learning that religion had a pretty profound effect on me.
Yeah.
Although I don't really consider myself religious. I don't go to, I haven't gone to temple in God knows how many years.
Yeah.
And I'm not, my wife is Methodist, and we're not really, we kind of have Christmas and we have Hanukkah as well. We're not really raising the kids in a religion, which I feel vaguely guilty about, to tell you the truth.
Wow.
I feel like I'm not doing what my parents went out of their way to do. So
Yeah.
I
Well,
feel
Mark,
like
do you pray?
I don't.
Yeah.
Although that's not quite accurate.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes I'll find myself in moments of stress, in moments of pleasure.
Yeah.
I'll find myself praying in some way, feeling like I'm attached to something larger than myself, without a doubt. So, but I certainly don't pray as a regular thing.
Yeah. It's interesting, Mark, because most people I interview, I would say, what age did you check out? And they go, well, 13 to 18. And, it's religion to me, being raised a Roman Catholic, it taught me community, iconography, singing. And then there's a whole bunch of things that people hate about organized religion. And it is one of these things that studying McLuhan is like, it has services and disservices, but it's really like religion. I mean, we got about 20 more minutes, but I would love to do a part 2 because we hardly got into political writing at all. But it's like people go, well, religion's the reason why we have wars. And it's like,
no, I hate that. I hate that kind of argument.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. So anyway, staying focused here. If God does exist, what would you like God to say to you after you die?
I'd like him to say that I meant something to many people, that I'd done things for many people I loved.
Yeah.
That I'd had a happy, meaningful life.
Yeah.
I'd stress happy.
Yeah. It's good. Do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
I don't think evil people exist. And I have a lot of experience with that. I've interviewed people who were mass murderers in Haiti, in Bosnia. I've talked to people who've been responsible for the death of thousands of people. And I've never found those people to be that different from other people.
Yeah.
I think that I think it was Solzhenitsyn who said that we all have a capacity for evil.
Yes.
And some of us find ourselves in situations where that capacity is used. It doesn't mean that people aren't responsible for their own actions. They are.
Yeah.
But I think that there's no metaphysical force of evil, really. I don't think so. I think it's a kind of placeholder word. It's like the word coincidence.
Yeah.
When we see something that we don't understand, we say that's a coincidence. And evil is also a kind of word that we use for things we don't really understand. We don't understand how a person could go and kill their family, so we say that person is evil. But it doesn't. It isn't a word that explains anything. It doesn't really tell us anything. And my experience of interviewing people who've killed a lot of people is that they're no different than anyone else.
Yeah.
So
it's amazing, Mark. That's a lot of people say we're all capable of evil. But I thought your discussion with Bill Moyers was so amazing when you said, I wish I could find the ontological source for the word evil.
Mhm.
And you said, you blew him away. It was so beautiful. You said, well, evil's a tool. No, I think he suggests it's a tool, or one of you suggests evil's a tool, and then you go, it's an advertisement.
I
And I was like,
remember
oh,
that.
my God. And then you said it's a means of persuasion.
Hmm.
And it was like it went so deep into my McLuhan study, because Marshall loved Jacques Ellul, who said propaganda is just culture in action. That
Mhm.
we demonize propaganda. And then, words evoke more than their meaning, because evil turned around is live, or it spells another word backwards.
Mhm.
Lie. Well, it's Miles Davis.
Live, yeah.
Live Evil is Miles Davis album. So it is an amazing thing, because the real hidden question here is what you do probe often is, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? And I'll set it up. Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. Coppola stole from the mob and the samurai, keep your friends close and your enemies closer.
Mhm.
JFK said, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. And Fellini says, I need an enemy. So it's a lot of prompts. The basic question is, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, how would you respond to Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
Well, I think that's as a statement, that's true.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that you shouldn't, in dealing with an enemy, that you should be afraid to empower them. I mean, maybe
Yeah.
you have to empower them to deal with them.
Yeah.
I think acknowledging is probably the best way, if acknowledging them is a way to engage with them. I mean, it seems to me the best way is to engage with your enemy and try to see what what is fruitful that can come from that, rather than, I mean, another way obviously is to ignore them and to be above it all.
Yeah.
But I would seek fruitfulness, um, productivity, something that you get from engaging with your enemy.
Well, that's what the American Indians, Native, Indigenous say. Your enemy is your best teacher.
Mm-hmm. That's great.
But I also love Walt Whitman says, I no doubt deserve my enemies.
It's funny, Whitman. I just listened to this wonderful setting by John Adams of his poem, "The Wound Dresser."
Oh yeah.
You know that poem? It's just a great poem, and I love Whitman so much.
Yeah. Amazing. And so here's the follow-up. Nassim Taleb. Games were created to give non-heroes the illusion of winning. In real life, we don't know who wins or loses, but we can tell who a hero is. My friend says, well, villains don't think they're bad. They want control. Heroes want freedom. And Gregory Bateson says, when the criminal gets caught, does he go, whoa, my criminal skills weren't up to snuff that day? Or does he go, oh, I did something morally and socially wrong? So again, it's a lot of prompts. You can go wherever you want, but the basic question is, does punishment work?
Boy, these are definitely profound questions. I think punishment in general doesn't work.
Yeah.
Even though we're raised with it. I think I find with my own kids that incentives work better than punishment.
Yeah.
And in general, that incentives make the world larger, and punishment makes the world smaller.
Yeah.
Makes the realm of possibilities smaller, more impoverished.
Yeah.
So I think the idea of making the world larger is much more valuable if you can contrive to confront things that way.
Yeah.
That's just a lesson, among other things, for my kids.
It's amazing. Yeah. To learn from, however this was set up, the learning curve is, you know, you learn from, you know, it's like the whole education system, like how much you love education because you're learning as much as they are. So
Oh, completely.
you're sharing the process. That's what caused McLuhan to write. Here's another book, the city is classroom.
Mhm.
He says, you know, it's the environment that's all this is that our classroom. It's not necessarily that room, but it is. He was an academic. So
Right.
that's why he's misunderstood because he was teasing people to believe his percepts were concepts.
Mhm.
So, you know, the first thing it says in Wikipedia says media theorist. He goes, I'm not a theorist. But he would probably say, no, keep that description because that's the world I'm in, you know.
Well, it is true that one of the great pleasures, the reason to me why teaching is so pleasurable is that you are learning with a group. You
Yeah,
are a leader in learning, you
yeah,
know, and if a class is not going to be good unless you are doing a lot of the learning yourself, which
yeah,
is why I almost never repeat classes. You
yeah,
know, I give a new class on something entirely new because I want to be fascinated and intrigued all over again.
yeah,
And I think if you're not doing that, I mean, that's what makes teaching a lot easier, that
yeah,
you're learning with a group of people, you know, and you're just the leader of the learners.
yeah. Well, it flows perfectly into this, Mark. James Joyce was the first projectionist in Dublin about 100 years ago. He basically checked out. He said, this is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree? And then, and then Faulkner says years later, sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism.
Mhm.
Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?
Well, I think, you know, putting it in a play or a novel is a way to attain a higher truth.
Yeah.
That, you know, I think that's been the way it's been from the beginning. I mean, think of the Oresteia, right, by Aeschylus. The Oresteia is essentially about the transformation of vendetta to justice. You know, the creation of courts, the creation of separate system of justice, and that was the higher truth about the courts in Athens, how they came from an idea of terrible punishing furies to an idea of dispassionate justice handed out by one's fellow citizens. And that play, the three plays, gives you that gorgeous progression, you know, makes it into an art form, makes that moral achievement into a work of art. And I think that's what works of art do, you know.
Yeah.
They're
Well,
not their major function isn't a realistic one. It's an expressive one.
it's an expressive over realistic because um Louis Buñuel says, I'm for anyone who seeks the truth, but I part ways when they claim they found it.
That's great.
But
I
see,
like that very much.
but the thing is that everybody says, I like that. And then I said, one guy finally said, no, that's bullshit. Because if I'm going to seek something, it's because I want to find it.
Mhm.
So again, it's just wording. So I morphed it into the question, if the journey is more important than the destination, why do we have to seek or name a destination?
Mhm. Yeah, we really, I think, don't necessarily have to name a destination.
Yeah.
Um, I'm not sure that journey ever will necessarily arrive at its destination within this life. You know, the truth.
Yeah.
I think that, You know, it's funny. I was on a campus delivering a lecture recently, and the guy for whom the lecture was named, the very first lecture, he came out and he said, when I arrived in this campus, he was, you know, in a wheelchair. He was quite old. He said, when I first arrived as a young man at this campus, the one thing I wanted was to find the meaning of life. And as I sit here now, and he just had an operation, he had brain cancer, he was about to die. As I sit here now, I can tell you the meaning of life. The meaning of life is laughter, family, and doing something to make the world a better place. Laughter, family, and doing something to make the world a better place, which I thought, you know, that's a fairly good definition of, I mean, it may not be the best, but it's not bad as a definition of where we're going. Not bad.
So much resonates with my whole life. I love that. And it sounds like, oh, that's Hallmark Cardi. It's like, no, that's reality. Laughter, family, and doing something to make the world a better place. Now, Mark, again, I always say, I want people to answer how I would say it, but I don't like insist that. But everybody says, well, no, we have to name a destination because we have to be focused. And you go, no, we don't necessarily have to. Well, guess what? The people who changed the world forever were sitting in Paris in the 20s, drinking coffee and just chilling. And you know, like Joyce said, you can have an epiphany in everydayness. And they called them flaneurs, and that's psychogeography, you know. Again, there's no right or wrong answers, but that one you got right.
I'm glad.
But let's stay on this word truth for a second. Here's Shelby Foots. I'm curious your reaction to this line. A fact is not a truth until you love it.
That's a beautiful line. I can see how that, you know, I could agree with that. I mean, it is true that there's a general proclivity for mistaking facts for truth. I think that's in a sense what his quote is about. That we pile up facts, we have information, and we think they give us truth, and they give us nothing like truth. Truth has to be in some way embodied love. I think that's
wow.
I think that's true.
It has to be embodied love. What does that mean?
Well, that something that is going to be true, not just now, not just tomorrow, but in 1,000 years, can't be a bit of information. It has to have some part of humanity embodied in it. You know, it has to be something that is not only true, but is fraught with some kind of love. I mean, otherwise it wouldn't last, if that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. Well, here's the deal, Mark. This has been so enlightening and one of the best ever I've had in my 40 years doing this. But I wanted to ask you if it's okay if we plan a part 2, maybe 4-6 months down the road. So
I'd love to.
And I really appreciate this. But can you go a couple more minutes now, or do you want to wrap it up now?
No, well, I've got my kids kind of running around in there, so I should wrap it up pretty soon. But
okay, let's do a couple more truth reflections, because I really loved you reflecting on the Shelby Foot. Most people don't like the Shelby Foot. They go, nah, that's bullshit.
Oh, but really? I'm surprised.
The one I never say anymore, but it's my mantra is I.F. Stone. The truth as I see it. To me, that just says it perfectly. You know,
I knew him a little bit because he used to come into the New York Review when I was in my early 20s. Yeah. He could hardly see, you know, so it's an irony, the truth as I see it.
It's an irony.
By that time he couldn't see.
He was losing Greek. Sight. Oh my God, like Joyce. Well, the other I.F. Stone quote I use all the time is, typos are worse than fascism. Whenever someone discovers a typo, I go, thank God I can reflect on okay, here's one that's really, perplexing. Eartha Kitt, truth is a theory that is constantly being disproved. Only lies, it seems, go on forever.
Oh, I think that's great. That's a great quotation. It has a vague relation to Popper and to.
Oh my God, that's amazing. So many people say that. So tell me why it relates to Popper.
Well, Popper talked about a true theory had to be falsifiable. In other words, for something to be true, it had to have the ability to be falsified. And if it has the ability to be falsified, it likely will eventually be falsified. A theory that's not really scientific, he would say Marxism or Freudianism, cannot be falsified. And that's kind of what she's saying, it seems to me.
Yeah.
Only in a backwards way.
But here's the follow-up by Marcel Proust, which they ask at the last page of every Vanity Fair. She's saying only lies, it seems, go on forever. The funny part is that she slips in that it seems, only lies go on forever. Well, it seems they go on forever. Right. So it's really
it's not willing to forget completely.
Yeah, it's really being musical. Proust asked, on what occasion do you lie?
I'd say trivial occasions.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Well, Mark, thank you so much. I mean, truly, this has been enlightening and fun. And I hope we can plan part 2, because there's so much more I want to get into with you. Your career as a journalist, as a movie producer, with Peter Jennings, and as an educator, and just someday down the line, I'd love to do a salon with you and John Else, because I mean, this is like to have fun when you're having, my friend taught me this line: when you're laughing, you're learning.
Mm-hmm. That's great. That's a great line. I like that. No, this has been a pleasure, Jerry. I'd love to talk again.
Okay.
Be a delight.
Thank you so much, Mark. Even though I'm going to hit the end broadcast button, I can't wait for part 2. And I hope we can keep talking and being together forever and ever.
Inshallah. Yes. May it be so.
May it be so. I love it. Thank you. Thanks, Mark.
My pleasure, Jerry. Bye.